Can everyone see my screen and hear me clear? Awesome. Okay, so I'm here today to tell you about Science Clubs Bolivia and how we think it's really a case study to how we can transform the paradigm of science education in Latin America. And so why do we have this idea, this question, this quest, if you will? So, if you look in terms of science production and you compare different parts of the world, Latin America has maybe, almost 10% of the world's population. And if you combine all the countries together, right, there's a GDP of $10 trillion. That's a lot of money. And yet it only contributes 4 or 5% of the world's annual output of scientific articles, right? So that's like a twofold difference. So you have 10% of people in the world, but only put out 5% of the world's output of science. For example, Europe is 30% of the world. So the United States alone, one single country, is 20%. And so that suggests to us that, that there might be something in this region that is leading to this deficit in production in scientific output. And so one thing that might be happening is education, right? So there's this program for international student assessment, PISA, there's by OECD. And so this is a way to measure, I believe the students are between 12 and 15 years old. They measure mathematics and language, etc., aptitudes. And so unfortunately, countries in Latin America consistently rank last or close to last. Like you see here Chile, you see Mexico, Uruguay, and so on. And some of them are not even here. For example, Bolivia, I don't believe is part of this list even. And so that means again that, even though, the people are there and there is money, but somehow there's something about the education that is not, that there's some underachievement in this part of the world. And if we look, here, we could wonder, well, maybe because there are different priorities that don't invest as much in education. But that's actually not true. Like if you go by percentage, actually, some countries in Latin America, for example, Chile, invests more in education percent-wise than the United States or England, for example, which are powerhouses of research. And so it doesn't seem to be about how much money you throw at it, but more about maybe about the way it is being done, right? And so one last graph here is to see, to show that not only, we have less scientific production and lower scores in these PISA international scores. Also, actually, if you even look at the percentage of people that finish school, in this case is focused on higher education, so it might be less controlled by the government and more at the private level in some cases. But even then, you see that you see these different countries. So the blue bar is completed. So you see Mexico goes almost touching 70%. But then if you go down the list, for example, in Bolivia here, which is a little square here to mark it, it's like 30%. So only a third of students actually finish college. Another third of them drop out. Another third is still enrolled. Okay, so 30% of students in college in Bolivia seem to drop out. So what is going on and how can we maybe help change this? Because I'm of the belief that if a part of the world is not engaged in scientific discovery and research, it's not just them that lose, it's the whole world, right? Because we don't know where the next big thing is going to come from. We don't know where the next Einstein will be born. And so I think the whole world is missing out on talent if we don't foster that talent from early on in every part of the world. And so maybe I'm preaching to the choir because this is Science Club International, but we think that science education is perhaps a way to address this. Like, can we improve science education in these parts of the world? And of course, I'm not the president of any country, so we're going to start in small steps. But so what some of us did, and this started in 2015 at Harvard, we're all graduate students back then, we started this program called Science Clubs Bolivia, Clubes de Ciencia Bolivia. And so, I should say that, it's part of a family of programs. Right? So Rogelio himself is the co-founder of Science Clubs Mexico in 2014. And then, he went to Colombia. So Carolina Salguero was my classmate actually in biology at Harvard. She was part of the Clubes de Ciencia Colombia, and then also with us, part of the Clubes de Ciencia Bolivia. And so most of people here in this picture, mostly biology graduate students, with the exception of, so Benjamin was in chemistry, and Omar is a doctor, but all in the same school, and they're all, started this program. And so, they said proximity makes things happen. And indeed, I think the pandemic, big loss is that, people interact less and ideas collide less often, but this is really part of us just being in the same school at the same time. Right, and so this is the first year. In 2016 was the first edition. We've now done 5 editions. And so this is the first one, and then if you fast forward 2018, so 2 years later, you now have not 5 or 6 instructors, but I have 16 instructors. And they're not only from the same school, they're from different schools. You have the Harvard still there, but you also have Stanford, UCSD, Johns Hopkins, MIT, and so on. And of course, we grew tremendously. Now we have these, very nice posters to, tell students to please apply. It's an application-based system, as I'll tell you in a second. And so what I've showed you today is what have we accomplished, or at least what can we quantify from what we've accomplished, and what we think are the future directions and the impact of this type of program in science education, really entrepreneurship as well, in Latin America. And so, so 4 main ingredients for this science clubs model. So one of them is course design, and it is important. There's 2 important aspects about this. One of them is that each course, each clube, so it's a science course, is designed both by a scientist from the United States or Europe. So we started 7 of us at Harvard, and then we expanded since to other places, together with a Bolivian investigator. So for example, Lucy has worked with us for 5 years. Every edition, she's there working with us. And so the fact that this is designed jointly with 2 people, so someone who comes from, like a premier research institution in the United States, and someone who is from Bolivia, that means that, we go to Bolivia for a week. So this is our 5-day courses. And when we leave, the knowledge does not leave. And that, I think it's very important, right? I might have heard of the term helicopter science, when, scientists from abroad come to places, collect samples and leave. We are the opposite of that. We fly down there and we work with people from there that work there. And so when we leave during the rest of the year, between sessions that happen every January, that knowledge keeps building up and that know-how stays in the place. So that's one aspect. The other important aspect is that, these are very hands-on courses, right? So you have 10 hours of discussion-based lectures. So what do you call active learning? Because we don't just expound topics, we also ask questions back and forth in the classroom, but also project-based laboratory, 20 hours, so twice as much. So the entire afternoon for those 5 days, we sleep very little during that week. We do lab-based stuff, right? We do PCRs, we run gels, we purify proteins, look at microscopes, and so on and so forth. Also do robotics for the people who are more in the physics part of things, right? So that's one important thing. The other thing is fundraising. So they might imagine that these things are hard to pull off, and so we're extremely lucky to really have a multi-pronged approach for this funding, right? So we partner with departments. So our own department, molecular cell biology back at Harvard, but also some companies like Amgen, for example, they give away equipment. There's like this centrifuge, we don't need it anymore. It still works, but we don't need it. Or pipettes, or even pipette tips. So we got a lot of donations in kind. It's called in-kind donations. So we got equipment, reagents. We also got, even flights. Bolivian Aviación, who's pay for our flights to go down there, or part of them. Lodging, we talk with the hotels down there, or hostels. Event planning services to make sure that the conference and symposia and the classes run smoothly. And so there's a lot of in-kind donations, and really was, it really takes a village to have this kind of program working. And then, of course, we also get some cash donations. So we're able to register Clubes de Ciencia Bolivia as a nonprofit foundation. And so if you want to donate to us, it's actually tax deductible. So that was an important step for us to get some cash donations, for extra lab equipment, reagents, and other expenses from organizing these things. And then finally, importantly, is that we always partnered up with a university. So 2 were involved, Católica Boliviana and the Privada Santa Cruz. And so they gave us classroom space, lab space, all for free. It was a symbiosis. They were honored to host us. I'll show you at some point, it's like 500 of us during 1 week. And we greatly benefited from their sponsorship in giving us a space. Another 2 aspects of this are the student recruitment and the testing. So for the recruitment, we use different channels to recruit students. So as I mentioned, it's an application-based program. And so what that means is that students will hear about this on TV, in the newspaper, papers on our Facebook page through friends. Now with 5 editions, like word of mouth also becomes a thing, right? And so they apply to it, and then we get, I think 1 year we got like 2,000 applicants, so too many, we can't take everyone. And there'll be a set of questions that they answer together with the usual academic grades. And so from there, really, we have a pool of very talented students, and also students that represent the whole country, right? As I'll show you, we're not just picking people from one region or from one type of background, but really a diverse crowd, diverse cohort of students for a program. And then finally, testing. So I'll show you, 5 slides with data, and a lot of that data has to do with tests. So some tests is really specific knowledge of biology. So every course has specific concepts that you have to learn. And so, we test the students before and after, and then we can compare the scores and say, well, did they learn anything with us, or did they just have a good time? And so we hope they both had a good time and learned something. And then we can also use that, to show some data, and also to justify our funding to the U.S. Department of State and the embassy, and so on and so forth. So those are the 4 ingredients. So how you design the courses, how you get funding, how you recruit students, and how you test those students, right, once in your program. And as I alluded to, in terms of application process, of course, we check for the usual, the grades and what school they're from, but also, most importantly, we have open-ended questions, which, of course, they take longer to grade than if they were just yes and no or multiple choice, but it's actually important, right? Because you can have students who are from rural parts of Bolivia, right? We basically, sometimes, some of our outreach activities is to send students to rural areas, to universities and high schools in these areas, and, spread the word physically. And so we can have a student from a rural area that's extremely talented, and he or she would not be picked if you were not for this open-ended question, right? So it's very important to even the field by really let the innate talent shine of all students. And so that's why we have these open questions. If you could design your own course, what would it be? Which course do you like the most, right? You make sure that they actually read the different ones and they come prepared when they apply. Or like, well, what's your dream science experiment, right? You want to work with centipedes, you want to work with modules to release oxygen and fix carbon, and so on and so forth. And so those are the open-ended questions for the application. And then, I think that approach worked well in terms of good representation of the cohort. This is a map of Bolivia, different states that they call them departments. And on the left is the student distribution in our cohort of 109 students that we chose for the biology only courses. And then this is the population of Bolivia. So you see, it matches up very well. And so I think if I can, pat myself on the back, I think we did a good job recruiting a representative portion of the population that is based on the population of the country, right? And then also in terms of other characteristics, so the gender, is very much 50-50 male and female. Age is also pretty balanced, so there's more teenagers, meaning under 20 versus 20 plus. Private and public, so in Bolivia, public institutions actually tend to be better, prepare students better than private. And so again, I want to make sure that there's no bias there. So gender is pretty equal, age is pretty equal, age range, if you will, type of institution as well. And education level, of course, will be mostly college, right? Because anything above 18 or even 17 is college. And then previous experience is an important one, right? Because when you have multiple editions, and by the time we wrote this data for this paper, it was our 3rd edition, what we don't want is to have the same people coming over and over again, right? We want the opportunity to be given to everyone. And so you see that, the majority of students in this course, it's their first time, right? We have some repeaters, but it's not that everyone on the 3rd edition has been coming every year, right? And so I think that's also an important point. Also for our study, right? You don't want to have your results biased by students who already know the model well. And so they're bound to perform better in whatever test we subject them to, right? And so the tests, as I mentioned, they're more specific questions. So we had 6 different courses, right? I myself taught the genomic engineering one for CRISPR-Cas9, and also some immunology. But it's model organisms, microscopy, and neuroscience, regenerative medicine. So there's something for everyone as far as biology goes. And I should say there are just 6. I mentioned there were 16 courses. So some courses are not in this publication. They have robotics and environment, and all sorts of cool topics. Okay, so here come the 5 data slides. So the first slide is to show you that, we're able to transmit effectively key concepts in biology with this, with this hands-on active learning. We call it participatory learning. That's the title of the article. It's a term in the science and education field. And so you see that it was successful, right? So if you look at the test, these test scores before and after, they're higher overall, and also for every single course, from all organisms to regenerative biology. And also you have the 1 by 1, it will be 109 lines here, and you see, I think 107 of them, 108 even go up. So that's good. So the topics were transmitted, and more than that, and this slide is actually my favorite one, this graph, is that actually we were able to do a bit of a control experiment. So we're grateful for these connections in Bolivia. And so actually, there's not too many college level biology courses in Bolivia, actually. But so we know someone who teaches one. And so we gave the same test, right, that we gave to the microbiology. So, right, so one of the courses are available is a microbiology. So it's up here. This will be the kind of questions, that they were asked. Okay, so I have that. And then we give that same test to students who took a whole semester of microbiology in college in Bolivia. And so what you see here is that, so this is the extremity is our controls, right, from before. So this is our science club's microbiology before and after. So it goes up, we know that. But then, interesting to me anyway, was almost shocking, was that if you ask these questions to these university students, they do as poorly as our students before they entered our doors, right? And so they're not doing any better. And even separated, very rigorous. We even separated between, all university students versus those that have taken Club as a Ciencia before, right? Again, last they will have some advantage being used to our method of participatory learning, which, it's not very much used in Bolivia, but you see no difference there. And so again, our courses, our 1 week long courses could teach even the people who already took microbiology in college. Basically, it's a punchline of this. And so he also tells us that really something has to be done to replace this perhaps rote-based teaching into something that is more hands-on, it's more practical, that really incites the pleasure of discovery yourself with your own hands. So another thing we also looked at is to make sure that this works for everyone, right? So I already mentioned that we managed to have a very diverse cohort, at least very equal in terms of age and gender and background. And so what you see here in these many graphics is that it doesn't seem to make a difference what the background is in terms of learning or the test scoring, right? So no difference by gender or by age or by education level, right? So if they come from high school or from college, no difference. Previous experience of being in the club as previous years or not, where they're from, what degree they want, right? Because some kids want to do a doctorate and some kids are okay with a bachelor's, but that doesn't change how well they do in these tests. So the motivation in life in general is not affecting the results. And then there's other, we get very nitty gritty, if you will, in the details, like what's the education of their family, do they have siblings with science degrees or not? And so you see there's really, never a change. Like the only time we saw a slight difference was the type of institution, in terms of the public did slightly better than the privates a priori. Once they took the courses all the same, but it's a small difference, right? So that's very good news. Right? Because if we want to use this model in other countries, and so it's already being used, as I mentioned, Mexico, Colombia, other Brazil, Peru, and so on, we want to make sure it works for different backgrounds, right? And so it seems to be the case. This method fares well with students from different backgrounds. And then also the last 2 slides from data is, what do the students think about it, right? And so we asked them. And so ask them, do they like to have 2 instructors? Do they like our courses? Do they like our motivation? Were they feel empowered by it? And so, from here, a lot of 4s and 5s. I guess there's 3 areas that we can work on, it seems. There's still room for improvement. So course materials, right? Some people gave it a 1 or 2 or even a 3. So, every year our portfolio increases, right? Every year we get more donations. We try to make our courses better every year that goes by. The clarity of course objectives, once again, can they be really clear on what we want them to accomplish, that can also be worked on. And then finally, the connection between theory and practice. There's obviously, the lecture part, sky's the limit, right? Like we can show data that we acquire in our laboratories that we cannot exactly reproduce in 1 week in laboratories in Bolivia, right? But in any case, we take that note. So those 3 things we can keep improving on for future editions. Also, has this changed at all? And some of them, like science, is exciting. I mean, hopefully it was exciting even before they joined us. I would guess otherwise they would never applied. So those are perhaps hard to gauge. But the ones I was happy about was this 3, right? That our program increased your interest in science, and majority of them say yes. Maybe 1 or 2 people said no. And they, so they increase interest in science. They'll be happy to participate in a similar program again, and they want to keep learning science. And so I think that's very positive, right? That means we didn't scare them away with our week long of, intense lab work, 4 or 5 hours every afternoon. And, I think these programs are important also because they connect with us, right? That, I think scientists, sometimes they portray like as being very aloof, as being very robotic even sometimes, or like not among us. And so that's just not true at all, we're people like everyone else. And so I think they connect with us at that level for 1 week. Hopefully that's what's behind their interest in science increasing. Like they can see themselves, doing great things in science careers. And so with that, what's the impact of all of this? And so that was kind of the topic of this, right? And so there's multiple things I could tell about. It could go for another 3 hours. But so one obvious one is that the Club de Ciencia Bolivia grew tremendously. It's like an exponential growth curve almost. In 2016, we had 110 students. In 2017, we had 200. In 2018, we had 400. And then in 2019, we had like 450. And then in 2020, we had 500. Those actually is kind of crazy. 2020, I have a picture of 2020 year with 500 people together, but this was in January, so it was before the quarantine hit. And so it's just amazing, to me, I think it really became a movement, right? So we've now had, many hundreds of students that have worked with us during that program, and I'm sure it's going to keep growing, right? And so it's really great to see that, Science Clubs International is having this online session because, the pandemic cannot stop science clubs, right? Science clubs continues. And so until then, we can be all together in person again. So the growth is one thing, right? It's very obvious. The other one is, of course, can we expand on this? And so at the time we wrote this piece with Mo, right? Who is the director of Science Clubs Bolivia. And Giovanni is an instructor like myself. We wonder that, internet is available to everyone. And so, there'll be influencers there, if you will, to borrow that term from marketing. But then I think it's really at this stage of going in person and then with this on the ground teaching that really the personal connections are made, and also that the new talent is developed locally, right? And then a third step that happens a lot, right, is that, then the people from Latin America go to other countries to do research. Right. And so, if you look at any PhD program in the United States, there's a lot of foreigners, right? From China, and I'm from Europe myself. And so that's something that has been working for decades. And now I think, but it's a lot of, there's definitely bias towards Europe and China and India. And so I think we want to expand that to Latin America as well, right? So people from all over the world, really. So there's something. And then, how American universities feel about it, talking about impact. I think it's probably the best quote, there's about science club in general. And also parts of the, at Harvard, there's like a society for Mexico. And so, the dean for international affairs at Harvard, she says, anywhere she goes, she talks about science clubs, right? She talks about us. So about all different science clubs, because she really thinks it's inspiration for next generation of scientists, right? So science is not just creating knowledge in the laboratory; it should also be inspiring other people to create knowledge in the laboratory and sharing that knowledge. And so these are all important parts of being a scientist. And so that's why the reception to science clubs has been so strong. right? So I think Science Coast Bolivia has been really, I think the amount of students we've been able to train and the amount of press we've gotten and on the funding and everything, and are able to report some results in literature, right? I think it's just going to keep building up. Science just keeps building on itself, right? And so, another example was, one of the students actually, she happened to be in my course, but she was the first Latin American student to obtain a summer scholarship at Harvard. This is Luciel in 2018. She went to my and Mo's home department, the Harvard Stem Cell Institute, and she was there for a summer. And she had a blast. Actually, happened. I live already in SF, but I traveled to Boston, and I happened to see her and say hi. And she was loving it. And so you can imagine how many more talented students in Bolivia, Latin American countries, just have not had the chance yet. But if they did, they would just shine. And so how can we help more people, more students shine in these premier institutions? I think that's really what motivates me in this kind of work, to give opportunities to these brilliant minds in the making. And then, finally, we can try to impact even further, in the sense that Bolivia is a very special case because there's some poor relationships with the United States. Right, in 2008, they literally expelled the U.S. ambassadors, but that slowly has changed. And in 2016, that green dot is our first edition of Science Clubs Bolivia. Ever since that, you see, have not just science clubs, we also have hackathons. The government also called upon all Bolivian scientists living abroad. They include Mo, for example, Mohammed, right? And then in 2018, actually, we hosted also a branch in Washington, D.C. There's a very big Bolivian community in Washington, D.C., so they organized that there as well. And they know that Bolivia became the first country to create a position of ambassador for science and technology, right? There was Mohammed that took that job. And so, so I think this is grounds to be happy about, like, the progress. So can we, through these initiatives, so scientists, can we be actors of diplomacy? Right? Can we even help heal relationships between countries through science? Because here we're doing it for the science, for discovery, right? Like, we want the free movement of people, and we want people to have the opportunity, to go back and forth. And so I think that's an important part of it. And so, so with that, just say again, thank you again for having me. And so it's been great to see. I've been to Science Coast Bolivia since 2015. The first year in 2016, so 5 years. We grew a lot, as you saw. Our last edition last year, literally the president of Bolivia came to our closing ceremony. So it really became a national phenomenon, Club de Ciencia Bolivia. And I wish the same success to all other countries. So Mexico, and Colombia original, also Brazil, Peru, and even in Spain. So the director of the Science Club of Spain was actually an instructor together with me in Bolivia. And so now it took this to Europe. So now I have like an Ibero Latin American network, and that I look forward to see it keep expanding. And so with that, I have my acknowledgement slide, which would never be big enough to thank everyone. So there's instructors, there's co-instructors like Lucia here, and many others, all the students that apply to our program, that come for a week, the volunteers that make everything happen, the sponsors, the press that helps us, publicize the argument, the events, the sponsors. I just have a few here to give an example. So we get grants from the U.S. Department of State. We get help from the U.S. Embassy in Bolivia. We also get at the local level. So this is like the state government from Santa Cruz and from Beni. We also get support from PhD programs in the United States, from where we're from. So MCO is my PhD program, and Mohammed's and Martha Zepedas. Other programs as well. So Hopkins also helped. Giovanni, for example, is from there, and the HSCI, and then of course at universities that hosted us, first Catholic and then the UPSA, both in Santa Cruz La Sierra. And so with that, I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.